If you care what you watch and what you read, get the Radio Times. From the men's room, meet the women who love to love. And from behind yellow lines, the men we all love to hate. To the heart of Malaysia in search of the White Rajas, Joanna Lumley rediscovers the past.
But as a key article by me reveals, only one television show squeezes the whole world into less than an hour without spilling a drop. Guess which one?
The Radio Times is packed with all-channel information, and with the help of its easy-to-use program pages, you're sure to catch the best in TV and radio. The Radio Times, it's essential reading.
Screen 1 tonight.
You'll have no bother, Carwin, believe me. They'll be swarming all over you.
I don't want them swarming all over me, Mr. Trout.
Mr. Preston! Mr. Preston! Yes.
Hello, girls.
Hello.
I never have any trouble with the ladies, Mr. Trout. They find me irresistible.
I don't know why.
Filipina Dream Girls. Screen 1 in 15 minutes.
Now on BBC One, with the time approaching 9:05, the news with Martin Lewis.
Croatia threatens to pull out of the EC talks, saying escalating violence makes peace negotiations irrelevant. Croatian forces seize control of 15 federal barracks and other military installations. And the Prime Minister all but rules out an early election after the Home Secretary advised him to keep his options open. Good evening. Croatia has threatened to pull out of the EC peace negotiations if the fighting in Yugoslavia gets any worse. It called the conference counterproductive and irrelevant compared with the war being waged in Croatia. 28 people were killed as Croatian forces went on the offensive, forcing the surrender of 15 military installations and seizing thousands of tons of arms. Federal forces hit back using Air Force jets and naval gunboats. Some of the heaviest fighting was in Vukovar after federal troops breached the Croatian blockade around military bases. And air raid sirens sounded in the Croatian capital Zagreb when federal jets swooped low over the city.
The battle for control of an army ammunition depot 20 miles from Zagreb. The first time the fighting has come so close to the capital. The army held on, but the Croats have also been able to claim significant success. Chronically underprovided till now with heavy weapons, they received a sudden infusion of arms and ammunition from the unexpected surrender of federal forces in a number of garrisons across Croatia. Blockaded for days, they decided to give up rather than try to break out. Unusually for this war, it was a bloodless success as the Croats ran their flag into the Zagreb headquarters of the Federal Air Force. The officers based there surrendered without a fight and were jeered out of the building, which was also an intelligence gathering center. Interior Minister Ivan Bekic said they were civilized people. They didn't burn the enemy's flag, but they did hoist their own in its place. And another success for Croatian forces at an army base overlooking Zagreb. For 3 days they had encircled it, cut off supplies of food, electricity and water. Tonight they took it over. We had to surrender, said the captain in charge, because their forces were stronger than ours. A Croatian soldier then shredded the Yugoslav flag. But there are many garrisons which have not given up, and the federal side has counterattack left in it. This evening the air raid warning sounded after 2 MiGs of the Federal Air Force had made a low pass over the capital. People ran for cover and prepared for the worst. The war is getting close to home. The Federal Air Force was also in action above a number of the war zones, especially where a garrison had just surrendered, as here in Gospic. The jets didn't change the pattern of events, but they did kill a sound technician of the Croatian television crew that took these pictures. And the battles for barracks are far from over yet. Where garrisons have not surrendered, the Croats are trying to loudspeaker them into submission with folk music and news, the only peaceful bombardment of the war. Martin Bell, BBC News, Croatia.
The Prime Minister is understood to have virtually ruled out the possibility of a November election. The Home Secretary, Kenneth Baker, has advised him to keep his options open. But high-level sources in the Conservative Party told the BBC Tonight that continued talk of an election this autumn is not in line with the Prime Minister's thinking.
The Prime Minister spent Sunday lunchtime at the Home Secretary's official residence. It was a long-standing engagement that aroused interest because of the recent polls and, of course, speculation about a November election. As a former party chairman, Kenneth Baker's advice on the possible timing of an election carries extra weight. His view, unlike so many of his cabinet colleagues, is that November still cannot be ruled out.
John should keep all his options open. I wouldn't make a decision at this time. I'd wait to see. I'd wait to see what happens over the next few weeks. I'd be encouraged because the trend has moved our way very significantly.
Mr Baker's successor as chairman, Chris Patten, doesn't apparently share the view that all options are available. He's always emphasised the advantages for the Tories of waiting until next year, which Labour claims is another case of Tory dithering.
It's all part of the Tories' deliberate guessing game. They're toying with the British economy, and now, sadly, they're toying with the British people too. The Prime Minister ought to call an election now, because Britain needs a new direction and a new agenda for the 1990s.
I think the Conservatives will have to be very careful, because the more that they go on the air and add to the speculation with their thoughts, I think the more the Prime Minister is going to be boxed into a November poll, which I reckon is now increasingly likely.
Senior sources in the Conservative Party are suggesting that Kenneth Baker's reading of the current situation might not be entirely in line with the Prime Minister's. They're keen to emphasise that John Major still aims to hold an election next year, and that a handful of favourable opinion polls will not be enough to change his mind.
There's still no confirmation of an imminent release for one of the two British hostages held in Lebanon. The Syrian Foreign Minister has now said there will be a release shortly, perhaps within 24 hours. But the deputy leader of the High Council of Lebanese Shiites warned today that the process could take weeks rather than days.
At the Syrian Foreign Ministry in Damascus, they're ready for a release and they remain optimistic. This is where hostages are taken under Syrian escort from Beirut. The Syrian Foreign Minister Farouk al-Shara remained upbeat.
What I want to say is that Syria has exerted so many efforts to gain the release of all the hostages in Lebanon.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And in the next 24 hours, you think?
I hope so. Bye-bye.
A picture of the British hostage Jack Mann was attached to a statement from one of the kidnapping groups last week. His wife Sunny has returned to Beirut and said she felt this time he would be freed. The signs in the Syrian capital are positive. Michael Macmillan, BBC News in Damascus.
The Israeli Prime Minister and Foreign Minister have urged their cabinet colleagues to tone down their criticism of the United States. The appeal comes after one minister accused President Bush of anti-Semitism over his threat to block a financial aid package to Israel. The American Secretary of State James Baker is due in Israel tomorrow.
Israel's cabinet met this morning with right-wing pressure increasing on Prime Minister Shamir to tell Mr. Baker his peace conference is off unless the loan guarantee issue is successfully resolved. One right-wing minister called Mr. Bush an anti-Semitic liar.
Because he is the first president of the United States that I can remember that took such decisions against the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
With the Russians continuing to stream in at a rate of 10,000 a month, Israel will tell Mr. Baker the loan guarantees are a simple humanitarian requirement to help cope with these people. But the Palestinians see the Russian influx differently. They see it shattering their dream that one day they will outnumber Jewish Israelis. And Palestinians who'll be meeting Mr. Baker are delighted with America's tough stance.
It is extremely encouraging to us that President Bush at this point has come out very openly and has asked for the postponement of loan guarantees. Because to me this indicates a symptom, this indicates a tendency to deal seriously with Israel.
Mr. Baker will expect a rough ride from the Israeli government, but he can now hope to balance that with some real progress in his talks with the Palestinians. Justin Webb, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The chief prosecutor investigating the failed coup in the Soviet Union says he might ask President Gorbachev to give further evidence. The man who replaced Mikhail Gorbachev as Soviet president during the coup, Gennady Yanayev, faces a possible death sentence. His wife, Rosa, has just given her first television interview.
Gennady Yanayev's wife and daughter on their way to the jail where he's imprisoned and awaiting trial.
You're watching HTV West. And now with the time at 9:45, we join ITN in London for the news.
The news from ITN.
Major meets Gorbachev, who says if republics want independence, they get it. Lithuania says then we take our freedom tomorrow. TUC won't embarrass Labour over trade union legislation. And a gold surprise for Britain in last race of Tokyo Championships. Good evening. President Gorbachev has said he is now ready to recognise the independence of the 3 Baltic republics of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. He said he'd allow them to leave the Soviet Union if it was the ultimate will of the people. Mr. Major said after meeting President Gorbachev that Britain would establish permanent diplomatic missions in the Baltic states as soon as practicable. He's the first Western leader